McLean where you want to buy only go up $28 a month? Have you?
No.
No, you haven't, have you? Okay. Then you haven't confronted that person, have you? You haven't said, you're absolutely wrong. You've sought agreement, you sat down, you worked it out in a classic close. Now, where does the classic cigarette routine comes? Your old pots and pan salesman, what they would do was take the $28.08 and they would divide it by 30 days. So then it becomes Terry, okay, or Terry's husband, hey Wally, it's a pack of cigarettes a day. I mean, can you afford a pack of cigarettes a day? Oh yeah, I guess so. Well then, I'll tell you what, let's sit down and let's write this deal up now. Okay, this is called, getting into a final close situation. And that's what we want to do in sales, don't we? It's always directed to a final close. All right, you're looking at the house he's looking at, and it's yellow, and you're talking, and I'm talking to Terry, and Terry says, well, I've said let's buy this house. Okay, let's write this contract up. And she says, well, I tell you, really it's interest rates, okay? In the back of her head, she says she doesn't want to pay the interest rate. All right, she's not going to tell you that. It's a subconscious objection. All right, so she's looking at the house, and she says, well, yeah, I like the house, but yeah, it's what you found for me, but it's yellow. I don't like it. Then the next question is, let me ask you, Terry, if we could have found this house today, the same type house that was painted brown, you would have bought it today, wouldn't you? Oh yeah, oh sure. I tell you what we're going to do. Good, I'm glad you said that, because one of two things, okay? Either I have a house around the corner that's brown, or a color she's going to like, or what I'm going to put in, say, I'll tell you what we're going to do, and you pull your contract out, we're going to write it up, and we're going to put in there that the seller is painted brown at no cost to you. Now, you don't know if that's going to fly or not. Then what you have on your hands is what we call the hard salespeople. We have what we call a liar or buyer. You now have a liar or buyer. Now if Terry says, well, I tell you what, John, I'm going home and think about it, and I'm going to call you tomorrow. Now wait a minute, Terry, I just asked you that if we could find this house painted in brown, that you told me you would have bought it today. Now it takes care of that other objection, right? One of the worst objections you can have, that I want to think about it. So it's basically taking information, taking underwriting stuff, okay, and being able to get into a final close situation, which is what we're talking about. All right. Now, if you stop and think, the next thing I want to talk about, okay, it's a little too detailed here, but you can look at your books. But the next thing I want to talk about is a problem that you all have when you're out there on the firing line. The firing line is when a prospect comes in to you, Grace, and says, yeah, I like that house, it's $85,000, can I qualify for that house? And what you usually do, okay, you do one of two things. If you're conscientious, you'll say, well, what do you make a year, what do you do that? Then you're going to do the old swag method. Well, yeah, you can qualify. And then you're just praying to God, boy, I sure hope I can get around that corner and get to the telephone, just as soon as possible to call my lender. All right? That's the swag method. Everybody know what the swag method is, huh? The old swinging wild ass guess? All right? And that's what most agents do. And the thing is, your more experienced agents, buddy, been around for usually you can get fairly close, okay? But the problem is, sometimes, is we're going to see when you don't get close. The difficulty that compounds it is that the underwriting formulas are not set up to answer that one question, are they? Have you noticed in all the formulas that we've talked about today, they are not set up to answer the one question that Ann's prospect has. What is the maximum loan amount I qualify for? Are these formulas set up to answer that one question? No way. You have to know the price of the house and everything, don't you? What you can do, what a lender would do, okay, this is when you call me up and I say, hey, I got to call you back. This is why I have to call you back. You call me up with the problem, all right? And we're talking. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you just doing with the VA formula. Now, basically, here's what I just want you to look at this side first. Do you remember in underwriting, we only talked about 5 finite inputs into all of underwriting, right? The gross income, total housing, what else? Total debts, deduction, and what's that fifth one that we use? What's that arbitrary thing? The compare to figure, right? That's an input, isn't it, into underwriting? There are no more. So basically, let's look what happened. I algebraically, this is what I'm doing at the other end of the line. What you would do if you wanted to answer it yourself, you couldn't get hold of somebody. I algebraically change the formula. Let's look what happens. I take gross monthly income minus total housing costs, but notice the P&I isn't in here, is it? I have taxes, insurance, maintenance, and utilities, but I didn't put P&I in here. We'll see this later. Then I subtract out total debts, and then I subtract out total deductions, and then I subtract out the compare to figure. This is all in your book. And then I only have one thing left, X. What does X have to equal by definition? It has to equal P&I, doesn't it? By definition. We're dealing with a finite number of inputs. We're algebraically changing it. So we're going to solve for an unknown, which is going to be our P&I that we're looking for. Now, what we have to do, first off, the guy comes in to talk to Grace. I come in and talk to her, and she says to herself, well, let me see, probably qualifies for around $65,000. So, we need a $65,000 figure, don't we? Because we have to figure out taxes, insurance, maintenance, and utilities. Right? Okay, so at $65,000, this is what they come out to be. We subtract it out. The total debts, I told her what my debts were. We subtract this out. She knows what my federal and state Social Security on the basis of what information I've given her. So I subtract this out. And then I told her that I was married and had 2 children. So she subtracts the compare to figure out. And we get $657.17. What does that have to equal by definition? Have to. Principal and interest. So we're going to answer your question, aren't we? What you would normally do, what most real estate agents would do, they take the mortgage book out and look up their tables at whatever the interest rate is today and see where that falls, wouldn't they? Okay, or a little bit easier method, okay, would be just to take that figure and divide it by the rate per thousand, right? And at 989, it's 11.5%. So we would divide it by 989, and we get $66,447. Okay? Does everybody see that?
Why 989?
Because that's the rate per thousand. In other words, instead of looking it up in a book, you can just divide it by the rate per thousand.
That's because you're just using 11.5.
Yeah, right. If it was 14%, it would be whatever the rate is for 14. Now, that wasn't a bad guess, was it? Okay? She guessed 65, came in at 66.5. We're only off $1,500. But we have an incompatibility here, don't we? The incompatibility is that we've been talking about algebraic formulas, and all of a sudden we made an assumption on the other end. An assumption does not go with the algebraic formula, does it? They're incompatible. This is the swag method, right? Now, it just so happened that she got very close. She came within $1,500. But I want to show you something where you really run into a problem. Okay, where you run into a problem with your guesses. If, when we worked this out, it came out to 66.5, didn't it? What does that mean? That means that the taxes are going to be a little bit, it means you can qualify for a little bit more, doesn't it? That means the taxes are going to be a little bit higher, okay? The utilities are going to be a little bit higher. The insurance, hazard insurance will be a touch higher. And the maintenance is going to be a little bit higher. Not a whole bunch, right? We're talking pennies, aren't we? And it's going to seem like I'm talking pennies here until I get to the bottom end, so try and follow me through. All right. Now, so what I would do, I would go back and I would fine-tune it. How would I fine-tune it? Well, first off, I would say at 66.5, the taxes are going to be a little bit higher, the insurance is going to be a little higher, maintenance, utilities, and it comes to 212. I subtract the old figures, because remember now, I'm paying a little bit more, aren't I? Because I can qualify for a little bit more. Okay, do you follow that, Mary? Okay. It comes to $3.70. Seems like chicken feed, doesn't it? But let's look what it does to a formula. Now, there's a little bit of a twist here. The $3.70 is an additional payment I have to make in that total housing category, isn't it? What's it going to do to the total available for family support at the bottom? It's going to decrease it a little bit, isn't it? I'm not going to quite have as much money left over at the end of the month, am I? Okay, so you subtract it from your old figure, and you get $653, which is a little bit less You then go and redivide it, and there's a point in this madness here. You would go back, redivide it by your rate per thousand, and we get $66,073. Now, let's look at what happened here. Here, a lousy $3.70 threw off the amount you qualified for by $400. Okay? This is why the swag method doesn't work. Because what happened was she made a fairly close guess. She was off $400. Now, the odds of her writing a contract with a loan amount between the $66,773 and the $66,447, let's say, are fairly remote, okay, at best. However, what usually happens when you're dealing with somebody is you're talking to them, and all of a sudden you're making a much larger error, aren't you? Someone comes in and they're talking $70,000, but they can only qualify for $65 or maybe $60. Or maybe you guess $75 and you really qualify for $85. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, a serious problem. Do you see why this can be a serious problem? Okay. Now, we're going to take about a 2-minute break here. Okay, we all set? All right, basically now what we're going to talk about is the heart and soul of this course. Now, the reason you're here in this course is to solve problems, okay? If you have a lay-down deal, and there are no more lay-down deals anymore, right, in this type of environment. But if you have a lay-down deal, you don't need someone like me. Call up a lender, do your deal, quick, you know, don't even have to worry about it. Do the old swag method, it's going to work every time, all right? But there's no easy deals anymore. I think all of your agents, and I have agents in here that have a lot of years experience, not only here today, but in my other courses, and they all tell me there's no easy deals today. You have to work for every, is that right, buddy? You got 20?
I think it's been the hardest year I've ever put in.
That's right.
I earned every penny.
Put the film on her.
But
Yeah.
say it
That's
again,
right.
buddy.
You earned every penny. That's
Every
right.
penny.
Poorest woman I ever met. But I tell you something, she has been very successful, and she'll tell you that there are no easy deals. Are there any easy deals anymore, Bob? Really? No, there really aren't. I mean, there's an occasional one that comes through. The guy calls you up, you know, just happens to list it, easy, come over, take it, gotta leave tomorrow, and it sells the next day. But generally, they're not. Now, to solve problems, if you think about it, when you have a problem that develops, it's either going to develop when you're qualifying before you take them out, or it's going to develop, if you're not doing your jobs, when you've written the contract and it's ratified, and all of a sudden you get a call from that lender, and hey, by the way, Grace, okay, and you die, your heart goes right down. All right? To solve a problem, there's only a couple areas that we can go to. Remember, underwriting has a finite number of variables, doesn't it? Has the monthly income. Now, talking in the bell-shaped curve of reality, we're not talking about the little ends. What are the chances are when you have a problem of turning to your prospect and saying, hey, by the way, would you go in and get a $7,000 raise tomorrow so you can qualify? Okay, doesn't exist, does it, for all practical purposes? The chances of Granny coming up with an extra $20,000 to solve this guy's problem, is that going to help him? Okay, you have grannies around, but the odds of that happening aren't very much. How about the total deduction area? Those tax tables are set by the government. We can't fudge with those. How about total housing cost? How about the compare to figure? That's set, right? You can't play with that. So we only have two areas left, don't we? Total housing costs to solve a problem, and the debts. Look at total housing costs. Do you remember how we talked about Bob buying a $60,000 house, and then all of a sudden he woke up the next day and said, wait a minute, I can't handle that. I want to make my loan amount, John, $59,000. That's only going to drop his monthly payment about $10, isn't it? That's why when I talk in my theory 10 equals 1, it's only to keep something in your head to remember it. What we're really talking about is $1,000 only controls $10, doesn't it? The odds of putting money down, a lot of money down, to solve an underwriting problem, okay, are minuscule. And I have up here 80%, but I'll bet you it's even higher, that 80% of your agents, when they have a problem, you know the first thing they say? You got to put more money down. You got to come up with more money. But it's absolutely the worst area that you can go to solve a problem. And I'm going to show you why. Do you remember in our case here, do you remember when we had our example, in the VA example, I asked you to remember 584, remember it was 583 over 560 in the VA example? Okay? You can change your book if you want to make that 584. In fact, you should be on sequential page. Anybody?
42.
Okay, 42. Turn to page 42 and change that 585 to 584. It seems small, but there's a reason for it. All right, now, And we're on page 42,
584?
584. Now, and at 584 over 560, okay, does a guy qualify? If 584 is the total available for family support, remember what the double hook means?
No.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? The 584, does he qualify?
Yes, he
He does.
Well, I'm mixed up on which one's which.
The 584, look at that. Don't look at the other arrow
That's how much
below it.
he has.
Versus 560.
Okay.
Remember in the VA example when we worked it out, he had that much
Well,
left
that's
over?
available. I've got it first. I'm sorry.
Okay, so he qualifies by what, $24, right, Ann?
Yeah.
Okay, do you remember in our example, I said that the car payment, the way I set the problem up, he owed $3,600 and the payment was $250 a month for the car, right? Okay, I'm changing it. Now it's $350 a month instead of $250. Let's look at what happens here. Now, the 584 is now dropping down to 484, isn't it? Over 560. Does he qualify? No. How much is he missing it by? By approximately $76, isn't he? Does everybody see what I've done here? This is the heart and soul of this course now. You must understand. Okay, now we have two agents. All right? We have the smart agent, those of you all who've attended my course, you brilliant people. And then we have the dumb agents. All right? Now, let's look at what the dumb agent does. This is what usually happens, by the way. The dumb agent says, oh my God, you don't qualify after talking to a lender, right, by $76. You've got to put more money down to get your P&I payment lower. Okay? This is what almost invariably happens every time. Let's look what happens. Remember, under our theory of 10 equals 1, where 989, okay, equals, is the rate per 1,000, close to 10 per 1,000, right? Let's look what happens. To get that P&I payment down $76, you have to put almost $7,700 down, don't you? Do you understand what's happening here?
I thought I was going to have that.
Oh, you're right. You're right on target. The agent says, hey, you got to come up with $7,700. Guy says, fine. He goes, starts looking for money. He's got to have $7,700, plus he's got to have $2,400 in closing cost and prepaids, maybe more. Comes to $10,100, but what did we say? He only has $7,000 in cash in our problem, which is the way the real world is, isn't it, usually? We're talking about the realm of probability here. We don't have a deal here, do we? Most agents at this point have blown the deal. The guy's petrified, he's scared, whatever. It happens invariably, happens all the time. Now, the smart agent, what does the smart agent say? She says, well, wait a minute now. I remember from taking this crazy course from John, putting me through this terror. He told me that really the only effective category to affect a case, a problem case, is the debt area. I remember from talking to John that any debt with VA, that's a VA house that guy wants, any debt over 6 months counts as a long-term debt. And I must know conversely that any debt 6 months or less is not going to count as a long-term debt. So I'm going to do one of two things with him. If I want to be sneaky about it, okay, and maybe the guy's really tapped for cash, I'm going to have him pay the loan down to where it's only $1,500 left, okay? I mean, he puts, remember he owed $3,600? If I put $1,500 down, have the man put $1,500, I only have 6 months or less remaining. Plus my closing cost, I need $3,900. Does he have enough cash for the deal? Okay, or most probably what would you do? We'd say, hey, go pay that car debt off, buddy. Okay, he goes, pays the $3,600 off, $2,400 for closing costs, he needs $6,000. Does he have enough to do the deal? He's got $7,000. But here is the wild thing in this business. This is where it all comes home to you. When he paid the car debt down, what happened? He eliminated it as a debt entirely, didn't he? So what happens to the total available for family support? It now goes up $250. So now he not only qualifies, let's say he was in equilibrium. Let's say he didn't qualify by $1, okay? It was $559 over $560, didn't qualify by $1. Now he eliminated the car payment. He went up $250 more in that category, right? Because he doesn't have a car debt anymore. Now the 10 equals 1 works in reverse. Now what happens is he can now qualify for a $25,000 more in loan amount, can he? Do you see what happened here? Here we have a case where $1,500, if you wanted just to pay it down, controls $25,000 in buying power. Here we have a case if the car loan was paid off, where by paying $3,600 off, the $200 he now can eliminate that debt. His total available for family support jumps up because he has more money left over, doesn't he? $250 more. Now he can qualify for a $25,000 piece of property.
Yeah, but
Now,
everything else goes up.
Now
too.
wait a minute now. Now wait, at 14% interest rate, okay, it's not going to quite be like that. But do you follow what's happening here? Okay, that he now is going to qualify in the real world today for an $18,000 or $19,000 more piece of property. And we can actually move the purchaser up. My point before we get into the question, my whole point to you is that if you have a problem case in today's world and you have somebody that has no debts, you're in serious trouble today. You really are with your people. Because where can you really go to solve the problem? Putting more cash down, is that going to solve the problem? Generally not the way our formulas are written. Putting $1,000 down only knocks $10 or $11 down. You know, a little bit of taxes down, a little bit of maintenance, utilities, you know, whatever. May knock stuff down, but it really doesn't affect it that much. Okay, now, you said, wait, she yelled something first.
No, you've already said it.
I
It's
answered,
not really
okay.
25,000, it's like 18.
Oh, it's not quite
19,000.
because of the interest rates
Yeah,
being
right.
up to 14.5% today. But that's crazy leverage, isn't it? $1,500 controlling $18,000 or $19,000? Where do you get leverage like that today? You don't, do you?
If his cash on hand is $7,000 and he takes $3,600 of it and puts it down, then all of a sudden he doesn't have $6,000.
No.
36
This is cash
closing
needed to
price,
close. He needs $3,600 to pay it off.
Yes.
He needs 24. Remember, this is a VA, no money down, so he doesn't have any. All he has is closing costs.
Yes.
So he needs $6,000.
Right, but all
Okay,
he has
and he
is
has $7 to draw from.
But he used part of that $7 to pay off the $3,600.
Yes, he
didn't
did. So now he's only going to have $1,000 when he walks in the house, isn't he? He needs $6 to got to pay the car off.
Okay.
I was hungry.
Okay, that's all right. And so by the time he's got $1,000 left over, doesn't he? Does everybody understand what we're talking about? This is why I put you through a lot of this writing stuff now, so that when you're talking to people, and this leads me into my next area, okay, which is called Andre's theory of relativity.
So if you've got to buy it with no cash and debt, you're out of luck.
Yeah,
Unless
Listen,
you
I
borrow
have
from
a-
his life insurance.
Yeah,
I have a man with
yeah, but see-
56.3 income and no debts.
But see, what we're talking about here,
single.
Ann, is, yes, are there cases where that's going to happen? Yeah. But we're talking about in the big scope of probability today. The odds of him getting something here and something there, do they exist? Sure they do. Could he maybe borrow $10,000 on a life insurance policy? Maybe. We're talking about the real realm of probability, though. And in the real realm of probability, okay, I can show you conclusively, I have, that the debt area is the most significant area to go to. And if you don't have debts, and most people do, thank God, but if people don't have debts and you have a problem, okay, you have a serious problem.
Okay,
The
John,
next-
could he do this, man, just ask
Sure,
me,
no
could he go to father and borrow $3,500 and have an agreement that he would pay it off
Well,
in
that's a-
3 months? And so,
Oh.
and he buys a house and he settles, and then he goes out and puts the $3,500
Well-
debt back on the house.
In 3 months, see, you mean before he goes to closing?
Before he has to pay off father, he goes and puts a new loan on the car after settlement.
Well, actually, you're talking about something that
After.
you've answered the question,
Right,
okay?
after settlement.
You know, I don't get involved what happens after
After.
settlement, okay? I understand what you're asking me. I'm just saying that you've almost answered your own question, okay? If he were to get something from his
Yes.
father, okay, and then it was really a loan, from a mortgage
But
standpoint,
under 6 months.
from a mortgage standpoint, I'd have to report it honestly, wouldn't I?
Under 6
Okay.
months.
Huh?
Borrowed it from his father, but he's gonna pay his father back. Do you take a look at how he can possibly pay that back?
Then I would have to say normally, if it was written up as an agreement for 3 months, it probably wouldn't, okay? However, remember how we talked about only technically qualifying? That formulas are only technical aspects, okay? You are now, in essence, trying to play a little game here. The underwriter would look at it, and if you wanted my honest opinion what would happen, you would certainly have a problem in that case because of what you tried to do, okay? All right. Now, this gets into my next area here, And I call it my Anders theory of relativity. Basically, it's based on experience and talking to a lot of managers and salespeople last year when I was starting to write the course. And that is that there are 3 critical areas that make or break a sale in this business, and only 3. They are the initial business encounter, and all the rest is fill-in. The initial business encounter, okay, the final close, the contract, obviously, and then for you all in general brokerage, the actual contract presentation itself. And all of these affect me as a mortgage lender. The one that primarily affects me, where you really run into a problem, is the initial business encounter. Now, we all know that when you have an initial business encounter, the first thing you have to do is develop a rapport with your client. That is absolutely the first thing you have to do. If you cannot develop a rapport or confidence, or a professional confidence, even if they don't like you particularly, with your prospect, not your client, you are in serious trouble. You're going to have a problem. But the next thing you have to do that most people really don't spend enough time doing, and one of the reasons you're here, is to qualify accurately, up front, and in depth. Let me give you an example, okay? A case that I had from Long and Foster, okay, a couple years ago that I could not save. A guy came in to me, and he was, we were talking, I asked him what he did for a living. He was a head chef for, I believe it was Marriott, maybe another company. So anyway, we're talking, and I said, what do you make a year? He said $25,000. And I'm saying, rocking along, saying in my head, it's okay, they got no problems. And I said, by the way, how do you receive this income? He said, well, as a matter of fact, $7,000, that is a bonus I'm going to get at Christmas. He had never received a bonus before. He was going to get it not till Christmas time, I think it was June or July. And he had absolutely no history, no guarantee he was going to get it in the future. There is no way, and we'll talk about bonuses later, but there is absolutely no way that could be counted. That agent didn't do her job in qualifying. Here is another case that actually took place of someone who is someone I knew very well, who's now retired, an agent, called me up one day in tears. And she said, I had somebody, and they called me up and bought this house, and I thought they didn't qualify. What happened was this woman, it was truly a lay-down deal, as we used to know them. Woman walked off the street, said, there's a beautiful home in Oakton that I want to buy. It's $85,000. No, it was $95,000. And I have the money and everything, and I want to write the deal up. She was on duty. And she started to talk to her, and she said, by the way, do you have any debt? She said, yeah, I have car debts, $400 a month. And after thinking about it, she said, well, there's no way you can qualify for this home. And so the woman walked out and went over to Maryland. This is how this all took place. Got hold of another agent, different company, went out, sold her a $95,000 home, qualified easily, and was so irate, she called this first agent back up, reduced her to tears, gave her a piece of her mind, right? And this woman called me up. And so we started to talk about it. As it turned out, she was talking to the woman. The woman truly had a $400 a month car debt, but only had 2 months remaining on it. So it didn't really count as a debt. And she kicked the woman out, and this particular woman, who I knew, happened to need the money. And the deal went by the boards. So I tell you all, seriously, that when you have somebody, you have to qualify accurately, up front, and in depth. You have to say, Mr. Jones, let me ask you, what do you do for a living? Let me ask you, Mr. Jones, what is your income? Is it W-2 income? What happens, Terry, to the guy that comes in who's an air conditioner representative and he says he makes $60,000 a year? Are you going to count that 60?
You're gonna ask him if he reports that on his
That's
W-2.
really, God bless you. That's exactly what you're going to do, because commission incomes do not count as much as W-2 salary incomes. You go by net income, not gross. That guy made 60, but he spent 30 in expenses, business expenses. They're only going to count 30. Do you understand that? That's why you have a problem with waiters and beauticians and certain other categories, because they don't report it. Only what gets reported is going to be counted. And you have to do this up front. You also have to ask, one of the valuable tools, okay, it took me years to learn this, when you're talking to somebody, to ask them, let me ask you, Grace, how much money you got in the bank?
Not much.
See, well, normally, you're either going to tell me, so you're going to tell me to, where to put it, okay? It's none of my damn business. But if you look at a client, a prospect, and say, let me ask you, Grace, how much cash, after you've asked them where she works, okay, I've asked her what her debts are, I'll say, let me ask you, Grace, how much cash do you have to work with today? And you look directly in their eyes and you ask them with a nice smile. Now let's look at what happened. I said, how much cash do you have today? What's that going to tell you? If I just said, how much cash do you have? She said $10,000. Maybe 8 of it's coming from Granny 3 months from now. Maybe Granny's going to die and she's never going to get it. Okay?
Or it's in a CD and they don't want to liquidate it.
Right. That's right. That's the way. Very
Yes,
good, Ann. That's the way a lot of these things usually come up.